Normally inside of a website, your text is going to take up all of your space. Often we don't want that. We want to split it into columns, maybe 2/3 of it on one side and 1/3 on the other in a sidebar, or 50-50. Bootstrap gives us columns that we can use. We're going to show just a real simple, easy way, and they can get much more complicated, of course. Here's an example of our text that we have. Now, if I want to split this into columns, the first thing you need to know is that it wants to know what rows they're supposed to be in. This way, our text will stay in an organized fashion. So we'll start off creating a div with a class of row. However, we're going to need to have another div which will specify how much space it's going to take. In Bootstrap, the columns are set up to be 12 columns. Now, we don't have to have 12 columns, we can combine them. To do that, we'll create another div, and we'll give it a number. That number tells us how many columns wide we're going to take up. In this case, 4. So it's going to be 1/3 of our overall width. Now if we go and reload, you'll see that our columns take up 1/3 the space, and we have a big empty space. If we copy and repeat this, you can see how we take up 3 columns, but we have some space in between, so all of our information doesn't run together. By adding another row with additional columns, we can start creating a grid system. We're just going to copy and paste our previous content so it's easiest to see. When we reload, you notice that each row has additional spacing, just as you would expect. So we have spacing between our grid columns and between our grid rows. While this is nice, it does beg the question, what do we do if we have one column that's longer than the others? Now we should aim to have our columns about the same size. Going back to our text editor, let's take the example of what would happen if our center column was twice as long. So we just add the content inside of our center column again, save, go back to our browser, and reload. You can see because we're in our rows, it keeps things nice and even. That way, we don't have staggered text. Now, we usually won't run into this situation, but it's good to know about. Going back to our text editor, we're just going to undo that, and we're going to undo the second row as well. What we want to look at here is our class. We have call-md. Why not just do call-4? Well, that's essentially because we're creating a hint that we're talking to computer monitors. If I look at our text and go into Firefox's Tools, Web Developer, and then Responsive Design View, you can see that what it does is if we get too small, it's going to start to stack our text. I can grow this, and when it feels like it's big enough, it will get to a point where we have 3 columns. But what if we could provide a hint? So, for example, let's say our first column is very important, and in a small environment, we want to take up all of our space. Well, we use call-sm-12, saying that if it gets small, use all of its space, where our bottom 2 we want split in half. Save this. Go back to our browser. And you notice that inside a regular browser for a desktop, there is no change. Once again though, Web Developer, Responsive Design View. When I've gotten to this size, basically the size for a tablet, my first column of text is going to take up the full space, where my second and third columns will take up half my space. This is because we're using SM. SM is designed for your tablet size. XS would be for phones, and there's even an LR for large display computer monitors. So it gives us a lot of flexibility. When we reload and set back to our phone size, because we have XS, we've specified for our small phones that we want to take up still 2 columns, each being 50% the size of our width. So by adding a couple extra classes, we can redesign how we want our text to display inside of a browser. This works very nicely for us and gives us a lot of control compared to just the standard hinting that we would get with regular Bootstrap grids. In some cases, we may need to use a clear fix, which is available, and we can specify by showing in extra small or small that the clear fix will occur, but only in those smaller devices, not in our larger devices. We can mix and match our columns. We do not have to have equal numbers of columns. So we can have a column that is, for example, 6 columns wide and 2 that are 3. Or we can have one that's 8 and 4. All we need to do is make sure that we don't go over 12 column widths wide. We can be less, and if we're less, we'll have a space off to our right-hand side. If you found this video tutorial helpful, please like and share it with others. If you want to keep up with other videos that are coming out, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and like us on Facebook. That way, you can get the most up-to-date information.